I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we have a very special guest with us today. You asked and we shall provide. We have Kalani here with us, Kalani Ghosthunter.
How's everybody doing out there?
Yes. So you might recognize him from TikTok and Twitch and all those fun live streaming sort of platforms because he does ghost hunting, where he basically lets the camera run and see what you can find. And I am very excited to pick your brain about this because you've been to some of the most haunted places in America, really. So before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Let introduce yourself, I guess. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Self-introduce yourself.
Self-introduce yourself, yes.
Yeah, so my name's Kalani. I am from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm native Hawaiian, and my mom's white. So it's a nice little mix of two different cultures that have two very different outlooks on a lot of different things. But I started this journey as a content creator about a year and a half ago. I was working for the state of Tennessee as a legislative assistant and a bill clerk for the Tennessee House of Representatives.
Wow.
And I was down in Fort Worth, Texas, and my wife decided to tell me, she's like, maybe you should make some videos. Because everywhere we went, we'd stay at haunted places because I was doing investigations before I ever made a video. And she told me to, make videos, and that was the start of this journey. And when I was in Fort Worth, I was waiting on a job offer from the state of Tennessee to be a videographer, and they went another direction. So I was kind of bummed about that and didn't really know where I was going to go from there because videography was where my passion was. And I was going to be following the governor around to do all of these really cool projects. So that one kind of hurt, but I'm really glad now looking back on it
worked
because
out.
Obviously, we're sitting in a different position now, but it's crazy how when one door closes, it's how wide another one can be. So I quit my job with 10,000 followers, and the rest is history.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, quite a career jump.
Yeah, from politics to poltergeist.
I love that.
There you go.
That's amazing. That's so funny. I mean, it's wild to see how much traction you were able to gain so quickly. And I think it's because you put out very compelling evidence. It doesn't feel like you're sugarcoating or things like that. Because a lot of people, they'll manipulate and whatnot to their evidence to make it seem more compelling. But you're just like, this is crazy. Here it is, And I think that is a really awesome attribute of what you're putting out. So that's awesome. I guess we'll start with what your favorite investigation you've done this past year.
Okay, so I love the Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas.
Yes.
Some of the Estes sessions I've done in that building, it literally feels like you're talking to just somebody else in the room. And that's happened at just a very few select places I've been to. But the Crescent, time and time again, I go and I get an interaction that it's kind of hard to explain. It's one of those things if I truly didn't know that none of this was being frauded or manipulated, if I was watching at home, I'd be like, there's no way.
Right.
So my wife is really good. She listens a lot better than I can, surprise, surprise. She'll tell you that all day long, but she's really good at being able to kind of be used as a channel, and that's something that we have found. So my audience loves throwing her under headphones, but the Crescent's one of my favorite places. And then we did an Oddfellows orphanage in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, which I was the first person to ever investigate this place. The owner was actually kind of watching and is a fan of me. And he goes, hey, I own this Oddfellows orphanage. Would you be interested? And I was like, put me down tomorrow.
Right.
It was a really cool opportunity. And the place it's one of those places not only are you worried about the paranormal, but because of how big the property is, you think that there's somebody squatting because there's nobody there managing it. It's just kind of just sitting there.
Right.
So my wife can't stand the orphanage. She doesn't want to go back to the orphanage, and I'm trying to plan a lockdown at the orphanage. So those two are probably my two favorites. The orphanage being a spot that no one's ever touched, which in this field is very nice to have.
So rare.
And the Crescent being a more popular name, very cool with how much interaction you can still get there.
That's amazing. Yeah. So what kind of evidence did you come from, or like did you get from both of those places?
So the Crescent, the Estes methods there were very interesting. Some of the stories that we didn't even know about, we had kind of insight come through. So on my Ovilus, we kept getting the name Norman, which if you know anything about the Crescent, Norman Baker was the charlatan that ran the whole operation, which that's pretty cool to get. But even further than that, we got this story about a guy that fell down the stairwell. He was too intoxicated. He ended up falling down the stairwell and passing away. And this was in like 2017. Oof. I didn't know this story, and they don't really push that story because it's so recent. Like, it's not something that they want to market and make, a part of the haunts there. But his name came through, his last name came through, drunken, pushed, and fallen came through.
Pushed.
And the lady watching that works for the Crescent, she's like texting all of these people that work there because she's like, oh my gosh, like Kalani has no idea about this story and it's all coming to him. So I like going into investigations, especially at places that I've never been, and I try my best to not know everything going into it because I feel like as humans, we're looking for the consistent answers, but if we don't know the answers we're looking for and they come to us, as an investigator, that's a lot more compelling. So when that came through and she kind of brought that to light to me the next day, that was really cool. But we actually spent a lot of time in the pain ward, which you have to rent out. There's a really, really nice, expensive room that you have to rent out to get to the pain ward. But we were able to access it, and the craziest thing, so she's under the headphones, and I have the girl that runs the TikTok page for the Crescent in there live streaming with me, and it was pretty much saying that it was watching her sleep the night before and that it liked her, and it mentioned her by name many times. And then what was even crazier is they all started like dropping their name, and then right when they dropped their name, the REM pod would go off. Almost like they were like tapping it after their name was called.
Interesting.
And it was like one of those moments where you're just like, what is going on? But something that I'm still trying to figure out is they're on like a schedule. Oh, spirits are on like some sort of time schedule because they'll tell me they have to go and they'll tell me like goodbye. And I'm like, where are you going? Like, what do you have to do? And they'll never tell me. I've never gotten an answer of them telling me where they have to go or what they have to do. And that, I think that to me, if I figure that out one day, it's going to make my...
It's fascinating because we had a similar thing at the Lizzie Borden house recently where there came a point at which everything was shutting down. You could tell the spirits were literally saying goodbye and it's over, it's time to go and things like that. And I wonder if it's not a pattern of energy of a place. If there's a crest, a rising and falling of energies that are accessible to spirits, and as you find a pattern of when the top time to, because I've noted that before in investigations, sometimes there's a time, and it's not the witching hour exclusively, but it is a time at which a spirit has more, availability than other times. And I wonder if it's not like a radio signal that is just strong and then it pulses away, and they're trying to get everything in at that time, at that specific, but that's a very interesting question, and it's worth paying attention to wherever you are. It's like, is there a moment, because I think that is a popular theory of, that 3 a.m. notion is that there's accessibility to the living, accessibility to move around, and it must be kind of desperate times because they're like, well, nobody's awake. Nobody's around to hear me. So, yeah, I'd be interested to hear future,
findings.
Yeah. Well, here's what's even more interesting about this entire almost phenomenon is I was in Dr. Ellis's room at the Crescent. And Dr. Ellis did not like the way that his room was refurbished. He didn't like the way that they changed it. And he started pointing out particular, specifics of the wallpaper. And he didn't like the wallpaper.
Interesting.
And we're sitting there talking, and he mentions my hat because he was known for being a hat guy. So he sees my hat, and I think that was what's crazy to me is how observant, especially when they want to be, how observant they are, and they let you know that they're observant by pointing out key characteristics of where you're at. I think that right there lets me know that they can see the space that we're in, but it makes me wonder, what limitations do they have outside of that box that we're in? But Dr. Ellis was getting ready to go somewhere. Like that was what was weird, is it wasn't that he was just saying he's done talking. He says, I have to go and pretty much do something. I'm like, what do you have to do? And he says, don't worry about it. So for me, it's like, is there like tasks that spirit have to perform where they're at? Like, do they actually have a schedule of things they have to get done?
Right.
We've spoken about this before because there are plenty of ghosts that seem to have jobs. Lost to time who they were, but we recognize the lady in white. We recognize the gray lady. We recognize the banshee. We recognize, these spirits that come with them a responsibility. The lady in black is supposed to show up to portend of death of a family member, a child, I believe. And so when you think of, is there some kind of work release program for ghosts? It's like, we'll give you, 20 minutes to kick around your old neighborhood, but you're going to have to go over here and boogity these people, because this is your boogity schedule. You clock in, boogity, you clock out. I'm back home.
It's like Monsters, Inc.
Monsters, Inc. It's some kind of bizarre thing like
yeah.
that. But also just a notion of the desire to get out of the place. It might just be a continual attempt to leave. I've got to go try to leave. I have to go get out of here. But as long as I'm here, I'll talk to you. Nice hat. Got to go.
But go ahead.
I've got one more.
Yes.
And this instance was probably still to my date, probably tied for the top interaction I've ever had. So I'm at the McIntyre Villa in Atchison, Kansas, which it's literally like 2 blocks down the road from the Sally House. Yeah. People think the Sally House is the most haunted house in that city.
It's a pretty haunted house, but
this house is a lot worse.
Yes.
It's not nearly as popular. It's obviously gaining popularity because that was the only place I've ever been scratched. So I had 3 lines running down my left arm, and I was like, heck
there
yeah, this is great. Like, oh my gosh, I got scratched. Whereas most people would be like, nope, I'm out. It was exciting for me because it's not very often that we have something physical actually happen. But furthermore on that, we were doing an Estes session. Again, I didn't know any of the specifics of the history. And I was sitting in what would be like the sitting room, and this guy came through. And what was interesting with this whole scenario is he didn't just give me like 1 or 2 little tidbits of information. He essentially laid out how he had gotten to that point. And he wasn't addressing me like he was in the room and he's talking in past tense. He was talking in present tense. So like the bubble theory, theoretically, 2 different timelines, there's a little rub every now and then to where there's overlap. And because we know the history of certain locations, or we're putting ourselves in a location, we know that there is history. Sometimes I think we may be opening ourselves up to those interactions. But what was weird was this guy was an attorney. He was a district attorney for the county that later turned into a judge. But he didn't start with that. He talked about how he loved baseball and how he came from New York and that he watched a game in Chicago, and that he came to Atchison, and that he was an attorney, and that he was presently working on a case. And then I asked him about the case, and he wouldn't tell me. Just like any actual attorney would do, you ask them about the case, and they're not going to tell you. So he was like working on this case, and he was like screaming at his wife in the kitchen to like, she was cooking, and I'm sitting there talking to him, and it makes me wonder, like, what if these are the gifted people of another timeline, right? Because here we have gifted people that can see things and talk to things that I can't see. So what if I'm the ghost in his house?
Absolutely.
And what was crazy is I asked him when he was living in the house. I asked him what his name was, asked him what he did, and we talked for about 45 minutes. And she's like drained because she's under these headphones for 45 minutes, and it's hard, especially if something's actually coming through. It's draining. So she was dead tired when we finished. But I took every piece of information that we had, and we ended up finding the exact person that it was.
Amazing.
And the craziest part is I go to lay my head down that night, and right next to my bed, there's a picture and a gavel, and it is that guy. And I didn't know it. So I'm literally sleeping in this room, and I look over, and I see the picture of the guy that just talked to me for 45 minutes in his living room. But he had to go. He said he was helping coach a baseball team.
Your brain needs support, and new Ollie Brainy Chews are a delightful way to take care of your cognitive health. Made with scientifically backed ingredients like Thai ginger, L-theanine, and caffeine, Brainy Chews support healthy brain function and help you find your focus, stay chill, or get energized. Be kind to your mind and get these nootropic chews at olly.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
That's incredible.
Wow.
That's absolutely incredible.
So that's a moment where I'm like, okay, I don't think that this guy is stuck in this house. I think that there is a different timeline that just kind of rubbed against ours, and I was able to kind of bleed over.
And we've touched upon that concept too, which is the idea that our perception of time is wrong. Instead of thinking of time as a linear thing or a path you're on, it's like all of time is just one big clump. It's a solid mass, and we are actively identifying our surroundings as we move around, but we're so close to everything that's ever happened and everything that will happen. It's all already there. And so the ability to access it, or the places you go, because Kansas, I've had several bizarre experiences in Kansas. Kansas, I think, has a very intense supernatural feel, and I think it's because there's a ribbon of limestone that runs right down the middle of that state. And I mean, literally jutting out of the ground in places, just like a ridge of limestone. At Fort Riley, Kansas, I ran into multiple ghosts that were highly interactive, were very much about showing themselves or being present or being interactive. So yeah, no, that's amazing. That's an amazing interaction.
For sure.
Yeah, you made me just like rethink this memory that I had where when I was a kid, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I'm able to see spirits. But I grew up in this house that was haunted, and I had a Native American family that would kind of just watch over me oftentimes. But one of the most visceral experiences that I had with them was the first time I'd ever been touched by a ghost, where I was sleeping and I was facing the wall, and I suddenly felt two hands on my back shake me and say, "Wake up," in a like really panicked voice. And I never could figure out like, why were they so worried about me? Because I knew that they were very protective, but I was like, it's the middle of the night. There's nothing going on. Nothing was going to happen in the morning. So I was like, why did that happen? But now you're making me rethink this memory. And I'm like, maybe there was something going on for them.
For their time, yeah.
And they're like, hey, little girl, you need to get up. Yeah. So that is so interesting. I don't know what I would have done in that situation, honestly. Like where you're having a conversation with this spirit for 45 minutes. But now I do want to do some digging as well on if ghosts do have jobs, or if anybody else has had that experience.
Well, just the notion that our life has urgencies that we carry on, that the things that we hallmark is staying and going, having a pressing appointment, doing something, and the fact that would carry on in the piece of us that remains on this plane, because this plane is identified by that clock, identified by the notion that we have something to do. And so, it's possible that one of the things that keeps a spirit from dissipating or moving or doing whatever it is that you believe happens is that connective, I understand.
Almost that responsibility
Yeah.
aspect. And like, if you think about people that older folks, once they stop doing something is usually when their health starts deteriorating.
Their health starts to deteriorate, absolutely.
And they end up passing away. And I think that's because we have to, as people, we have to have a task.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps everything going. When you don't have a purpose, when you lose your purpose, it's kind of hard to find a reason to wake up the next day.
Well, and we talked about this as a degradation of a spirit is oftentimes obsessive need to do something, because even if the thing that they want to do is a good thing, if they become obsessive about it, they stop caring about other people's feelings, stop caring about their impact, and it becomes, for lack of a better term, demonic in its essence, because it is so bent on achieving a task that it is not considering its effect on
the repercussions.
The repercussions, yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
And what I think is interesting is, like, especially when you go to places that are abandoned, and this is something I touched on with one of my buddies, Adam Kimmel, who owns a few locations in Ohio, is everyone has this desire to leave their mark, whether that's spray painting your name on the wall,
absolutely,
or slapping your name on a project, Or I think that's part of what this purpose-driven notion is as people, is we have to leave our mark on something. And even as a spirit, I feel like, for a lot of places, how many spirits are actually named Sarah, or how many just come forward when you give them the name Sarah?
Right.
Because for them, they want to be heard, they want to be noticed, they want the attention. And if, a TV show goes in here and says, there's a little girl named Sarah, and now everybody that comes in there doesn't look for anybody else, and they're just looking for Sarah, and your name's, Jeremy, but Jeremy wants to get noticed, so he'll come forward as Sarah. Mm-hmm. So I feel like as an investigator, sometimes we get in trouble, especially after TV shows, because TV shows, they paint narratives, and that's, they're in it, they have to hit ratings.
Sure.
And that's what the beauty of my approach and how I do it is. There's no agenda. Roof, there's no ceiling, there's no floor. I can do what I want, and we can sit there for 6 hours and have absolutely nothing happen. But I think that actually makes the moments where something does happen and the moments that something truly comes forward that much more exhilarating, because you've sat through 4 hours of watching me act stupid in a place and sing music and just let my ADHD take control.
Sure.
And now all of a sudden something happens, and now I react to that. It's a lot more compelling because I don't have to have something happen for my content to do well.
Right.
And I think that's what people have bought into, is there's this transparency and authenticity that they can buy into with me that they can't find a lot of other mainstream paranormal.
For a while, and I want to say this is probably well over a decade ago, probably 15 years ago or so, there were certain locations that ran their security cameras live feed. The Willard Library is the one that comes mostly to mind, and you could just all night, and I did. There was nobody hosting it. There was nobody talking. I'm just looking at a bunch of books, because it's like, I'm
watching nothing.
Go over to the children's book section, and I'm just like stuck to it. I'm watching it like crazy, and that is something that I think a lot of people who watch the ghost hunting shows don't get a full appreciation for. A ghost hunt is 99% boring, is 99% sitting and waiting and sitting and letting time pass, occupying a space. It's not you show up and something happens. It's you show up and you're willing to engage and you're willing to be there. And so there are long swaths of time, but no one knows how to market being in the haunted place, like as a package. Like, here's an hour-long show of the guy sitting in a room, so they're like editing and trying to create, they'll hit stings
we'll be here for one night.
Right. One night isn't going to do it. Yeah.
You're taking a highlight reel of everything that's happening.
Right. You're making a highlight reel, which diminishes the audience's appreciation of what goes into it, because the audience is like, oh, okay, well, I could do that. It's like, and
then they go actually do it.
Right.
And they're like, this is freaking taking so much time, because not only do you have to have the time to investigate, because not a lot of people can just rent out a place for an entire week or have a place invite them in for an entire week and do what I do. I'm blessed to have that opportunity. But even when I was just doing one-nighters, at some of these big box stores is what I call them, like your Waverly Hills, your Trans-Alleghenies.
Right.
You are on such a time crunch. Like, if you want the tour, you've just eaten up an hour and a half of your time, and now you're down to 7 hours or 6 hours, and now you have to get all your stuff set up. So by that time, you've just lost another hour and a half, and by the time you're even investigating, you've only got like 5 hours left.
Oh yeah,
and they're pushing you out the door the moment that clock is approaching 4 is usually when they set you out. So it's really tough, especially if you're in the business of trying to actually get some sort of intelligence or evidence. But I think what's crazy to me is I have audience members and viewers of mine that will call out of work. They will literally stay up days on end, suffering just as much as me through the lack of sleep.
To be another set of eyes.
They are invested in what's going on, because at the end of the day, for me, this journey I'm on now, it's not about me being able to go to the haunted places anymore. It's now about being able to take people that can't leave their 5 kids, that can't leave their job, that can't go out and go to these places. I'm trying to find ways to bring them along on this adventure. So I've cut my editing or my review footage time down to nothing, because at any given point, there's thousands of people that are watching the same thing that I would have to watch when I go home, that can clip it and send it to me while I am asleep.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful, because instead of, embracing the idea of cutting everything I do down to just the highlight moments. They are getting to participate and be a part of the entire process of reviewing footage and being a part of active live feeds, which for me makes the biggest difference. And this is something that I just recently started because it takes a lot of logistics to make this work right.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But what's beautiful about it is the moment that I started doing it. I mean, like I said, we were at 21 million views in 3 days. And last night I went to sleep and there was 8,000 people watching surveillance camera footage.
Nice.
From all across the world.
So amazing. And that's got to be the largest ghost hunt team
Right.
in the world.
Yeah.
And they're all, and it's all treasure hunting too. Mm-hmm. Everyone is watching this.
They want the next best clip.
Right.
And sometimes it's kids in there and kids get scared over, they'll keep themselves entertained in the chat.
And they'll see something moving. They'll be like, that was it.
But what's crazy is it's such a mix of people from different backgrounds, from different races and ethnicities. Like, what's beautiful about the paranormal is there isn't any factual basis.
Yeah,
like, there
absolutely.
isn't any concrete, this is how it is. If you can tell me why you think the sky is red, then I can't argue with it.
Right.
Right.
So what's beautiful about that is so many people can come under this umbrella of being a paranormal investigator or a researcher or a psychic or a medium or somebody that's gifted. Like, there's so many different facets to this field. And I think because of how widespread it is starting to become and more accepted, 20 years ago, there may have been the interest, but people weren't as accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that now you're starting to see, and this field's very cyclical, just like anything else. There's times where you'll see a huge spike in people that are trying to create content. But I tell people all the time, when I started this journey, it was never about trying to become this famous ghost hunter. It was about me having a hobby and a passion and letting people come along for that adventure. So now I'm still embracing that, and I still focus on my community aspect because I have people from all around the world that find joy in being able to join me on this adventure. Because I'm very Gen Z, like my humor is very Gen Z oriented. So instead of me being a fearmonger, like pretty much 99% of paranormal content is, I'm like joking, I'm chilling in a spot, I'm like eating some Pringles, drinking a drink.
Yeah.
And the juxtaposition of taking my content, putting it next to a TV show that was in the same spot, and this guy is screaming, running, saying he's possessed, it starts to kind of turn the wheels in people's head. They're like,
Yep.
okay, what am I watching here? This guy is sitting here singing a Mariah Carey Christmas song, and then this guy is saying he's possessed and he's rolling around on the floor. There has to be something that we're not seeing here. There's something that's being added in. And that, for me, when I first started, I was like, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to tell all these people, I'm going to debunk all these people. But now I don't care because the juxtaposition of my stuff to theirs is doing it for me. So I don't even have to open my mouth.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, and it's refreshing to not see someone, roll around on the floor and be like, I'm being scratched, I'm being attacked. And it's like, okay, that's enough of that, I think it's very nice to show ghost hunting for what it actually is. But you've been spending the week basically in William Mark McCullough's house, which if you listen to Mark's episodes, he's been on the show like 3 times at this point, 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And he based his film, Savannah Haunting, off of his home and whatnot. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in that house in general, but can you kind of give us some highlights, if you will, of what you found so far?
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you. I was skeptical in the beginning because you have a movie asking you to come out to almost like go into the house and see what you find.
Promote the movie, maybe.
Yeah.
And for me, as a marketer myself, because to be good in this field, you have to be able to market yourself and market what you do. I mean, that's anything in life. So I'm like, okay, this movie is asking me to come in, and I have my own independent systems, which for me, it's all about trying to eliminate as much inauthenticity as possible. Sure. Which I wasn't coming in thinking they're going to like make stuff fly around, but it's just like, okay, horror movie, inviting me in. This is a little weird. So Alexis reaches out and we set it up, and I was like, you know what? Sure, I'll come do it. So I set my system up. I'm running on an hour of sleep. We pulled in like 2 days ago, and I'm setting all my cameras up. Running on an hour of sleep. I just take a nap. I'm done. We go out to eat Zaxby's because I had to get something quick because the investigation was starting in 30 minutes because I overslept because I had no sleep.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody catches on one of my surveillance cameras, my Canon camera turning on. We weren't even in the house, but we're in the floral room, is what I call it, where the floral wallpaper is, the bedroom that's supposed to be the most haunted.
Yeah.
I have my camera sitting on the table or the vanity right in front of the mirror, and clear as day, you just see, and the screen comes on. So I go back into the house, and one of the people watching, sends me a message, and they said, hey, look at this clip. And sure enough, I'm sitting here watching the clip, and you see the camera turn on. So then I go and look at my camera, the toggle switches on, and the battery's dead because it had been on. So I'm like, okay, let me just use my logic here. I know I didn't set this up for this thing to go off. The camera was running the entire time, and it's my system, so I know that there isn't any issues there.
Right.
So my camera turns on. I'm like, okay, this isn't like some big facade. So that right there, we hadn't even started investigating, and that's what already happened.
And the Canon is a toggle. It's not a
button.
You literally have to physically turn it.
So something had to turn the switch to turn it on. And I almost want to think that it's almost like telling me like I'm here.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't want to cause. I don't think there's anything in there that's harmful. I haven't had that experience.
I think that they went through great lengths to neutralize any threat. Based.
Because Mark said that he felt in danger at times when this certain thing was in the house. But for me, being Native Hawaiian, there is a spirituality involved with that, where I've had a lot of people that can see and hear and do things that I can't do, that have told me that there's almost like this, like a bubble, and nothing really can enter that bubble due to some of the spirituality aspects of being Hawaiian. So I go to these places, like Bobby Mackey's, for example. I threw a gummy worm in the portal to hell and I climbed down there and ate it. Like, you tell me a place had an exorcism and there's stuff crawling on the walls, I'm like, bring it. You know, I played 8 Ouija boards on top of the world's largest Ouija board in a thunderstorm. Like, anything that they tell me not to do, I will do it. Because for me, I don't want somebody to watch my stuff and be afraid of what's under their bed. I want somebody to watch my stuff and feel empowered to not be afraid, because I have a lot of kids that watch me too.
Sure, absolutely.
And I remember as a kid, you know, when you have to go get something out of the fridge and it's pitch black in your house, you're like freaking sprinting down the stairs, running up, and you're running back upstairs. But I want somebody to be empowered to where they feel that they don't have to be afraid of what's in the dark, but they can actually be friends with what's in the dark.
Sure.
So I do everything that they tell me not to do. If you told me to open a Dybbuk box on this table right now, I'd do it, because I think a lot of what happens from cursed items or attachments is powered by our mind's perception of what they're supposed to do.
Well, yes and no, because you say yourself that you have the bubble, which is not just...
I don't say that.
I mean,
other people
have said that
so
to you.
I'm like...
But you're reaping in the reward of being protected.
Yeah.
Versus somebody who may not have the same protection, may not have the same spiritual background, may not have the same knowledge base, and could recklessly go into a situation. Because the end result is, I've seen the damage, and I've seen the protection. And it's funny because I have something I call the white box. White box is something that you can induce yourself. You can create a protective layer, but the trick is making sure that it's a part of your integral operations. You know, your ability to be brave is an integral protection against the things that would harm you, because nothing's going to waste its energy to fight you.
It would just go.
It would take advantage of the person who's
and I don't think that, I'm not saying that I don't think that there's items out there that are cursed or could have things attached to it.
I'm just saying.
But I definitely think that if you believe something to be haunted, your energy dumped into what's going to scare me in this place,
it's one of the tenets
can empower
right.
whatever's there. So for my biggest, this is like something I've been working on. If I took a control group of 10 people and I had my experimental group of 10 people, and I told the control group, this is just an empty building, and I send them in and I get a report of if they experienced anything. And then I send in the 10 people, I tell it's haunted and why it's haunted and who's haunting it. How many of those people are going to have a paranormal experience compared to the 10 that weren't expecting a paranormal experience?
Sure.
And I think that's something worthwhile to note, because a lot of what people feed into an environment will determine what they get out of the environment.
Absolutely.
And I think egregores and tulpas are very prevalent in a lot of your big box hauntings, like Bobby Mackey's, for example. They've debunked a ton of the stories associated with that place. but because so many people believe it to be there,
Absolutely.
something has been created that reacts as activity.
Yeah, the classic is which came first, the ghost or the ghost story.
True.
And the concept of spirits only having so much identity to work with, and the further away from their identity to get, the more receiving or receptive they are to an identity you can give them. You know, if you're suddenly saying Sarah, and they're like, "Oh, I'll be Sarah."
I am
Sure,
Sarah,
okay. You need a Sarah? I'll be a Sarah. Okay, just give me a second. It's the classic. It's like, well, how can one person haunt so many places? Like, why is Abraham Lincoln haunting the White House and his childhood home and all these other places? And it's like, well, because ghosts are not linear. A, or B, because if you're like, oh, it's Abraham Lincoln, the ghost is like, yes, it is. I'm Honest Abe. Yeah, it's like, wait, let me get a hat. Yeah, okay.
And like with the Savannah haunting house, I think part of that haunting is this idea that so many people believe it to be haunted now from the movie. Like,
Right.
I know that Mark had his experiences, and that's what's really cool is so many people that have been there have had paranormal experiences without even knowing that the place was haunted.
Sure. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So you have this layer of a baseline haunting, and now you've added on the aspect of a movie's been created here, and all of this attention has been brought between me and other people to this specific house, and it's almost like it's feeding from this attention that it's being brought. So last night we had a connection with a woman named Betty. Now Betty was friends with his grandmother, and Betty also used to own the land. So Betty's daughter is in my chat. We get the name Betty twice on the Ovilus. Or we get the name on the Ovilus once, and then it comes through my spirit box. It says Betty. So I'm like, is there a Betty here? I didn't know anything about Betty. But then her mother's in the chat, and Alexis is in the chat, and they're like, oh my gosh, Betty. So we start kind of exploring this. The night before, I smelled floral perfume in that unfinished room in his house. And I'm like, why does it smell like floral perfume? No idea. The next night, Betty comes through, and I was like, hey, Sandy, what kind of perfume did your mom wear? And it was like some rose warm perfume. So we start interacting, and she essentially comes through, and Sandy pretty much let us know that she was a very religious woman of faith. She said that she wasn't trapped at the house, that she was there because she wanted to be there, and that I asked her, are you part of what protects this house from whatever's outside of it? And she said yes. And I was like, okay. And then I'm kind of asking her, and the activity started to kind of wind down. And I'm like, do you have to conserve like a level of energy so that you can do your duties? And she said, sort of. So I was like, huh. And she was like, you're really nice. And she brought up our last name, which I don't put my last name out everywhere.
Yeah.
So, it's not like I was walking in saying, this is my name. But it was just really cool because it was something I wasn't looking for that found me. And I think it's interesting because that house has so much weird energy, and you go from downstairs to upstairs, it changes, you turn on the lights, you turn off the lights, it's daytime, nighttime, it just changes so much. And what's interesting is the little girl that was in the movie that people have seen on security camera footage and this, that, and the other. I've gone to places that I'm supposed to see stuff crawling on the walls. I'm supposed to see this, that, or the other. And you don't ever have any of it happen.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
But the second night we're there, I'm sitting in his office, just, using a few different tools to investigate. And I thought I saw a little head over the couch, which I'm over here looking at my Ovilus, but, out of the corner of your eye, if you see like mass move.
Right, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're like, okay, what the heck was that? So I made comment of that in the room. Like, man, I swear I just saw like a little head pop up. But, I guess I could have just been seeing it. Your peripheral vision's not very accurate. So I was like, I did kind of disregarded it. So I go back to the room where she's sitting because she runs all of my surveillance cameras while I'm investigating. And she goes, hey, you're going to want to look at this. So somebody that was watching, again, beautiful
Right.
part about
Yeah.
having so many people a part of this process, kind of takes this 10-second clip and they slow it down and frame by frame it, which I have a very, very high quality surveillance system because I hate looking at CCTV
Right.
Yes.
footage that looks like it was filmed on a Motorola Razr. Like, I wasn't going to have that for any kind of evidence. But anyway, so he's using this footage that I'm streaming, and frame by frame you see. And in one side of the lamp, it's one face, and as it keeps going, it shifts, and then all of a sudden it gets to the other side of the lamp, and it is the side profile of this little girl. You can see her eye, you can see her nose, you can see her hair.
I saw that. I saw you post
and
about that.
It's not any part of her body, but it's just the head. And I thought that was interesting because I made note. I thought I just saw a head
pop up. Yeah.
Didn't think anything of it. I come back to my room. All of a sudden, now we have a clip where somebody caught a head. So it's one of those places like I was very skeptical going in.
Sure.
But now after looking at everything that we've obtained, and I know that the stuff that we've obtained, there's no way for me to manipulate that, and there's no way that anyone else could manipulate that. So it's like, okay, this place is actually haunted. It's not just this big story that has been pushed to pump this movie. I mean, it really is haunted.
Oh, yeah.
And, not saying that Mark would lie about that, but when you're in the business, and his place is his home.
He lives there.
Yeah.
That, for me, was one thing is like, okay, he's not trying to rent this place out. He's not trying to get people to book it.
No.
So he doesn't need anything to happen. So anything that does happen is just kind of there.
Yeah.
And I think with a lot of like I said, with locations, when you turn it into a business, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about filling those dates. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times I've met a few owners that will very much exaggerate activity or push certain narratives because they need people to book. But with Mark's place, he doesn't have any gain from that. So I think I went in very skeptical, and I'm leaving or on the way out a believer.
I'm not surprised you saw the little girl because I am a true believer that spirit is something that's attached to Mark specifically and not necessarily the house, because one of the last times he was on the podcast, he had talked about how he had moved away at one point and this little girl was still with him. So I feel like she's very active because she's kind of almost feeding off Mark's energy. Sure. And Mark is a true believer in all of this stuff. So like that's a lot of energy he's putting out in general. But it was so exciting to see that piece of evidence that you caught and you posted about, because I was like, oh, cool. Now we all can see what Mark's been talking about for so long.
Oh yeah. This house first came on my radar over 10 years ago. And just in the circles that I work, it was like, you got to get out to Mark's house. It's insane, what's going on there. But it was not tell everyone. It wasn't even like broadcast. Don't let it out. But here, because it was all done in confidence. It was like, hey, there's this haunted place, and and there was no like line to making
Connect.
a movie or doing,
Yeah.
that wasn't the point. He was hosting like classes in his house, and people were having these experiences, and I think they were looking to looking at it as a location place, and one of the location managers was like, this place is off the chain. It's insane.
Right.
And that's my thing is it's like you have to be very skeptical of what people feed you. And I went in the first night, I didn't know anything. And I wanted it to be that way because, like I said, I want the information to come to me, because that is the ultimate sign that you're dealing with something with intelligence, is when they're telling you what they want you to know, not you're looking for what you want to know.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think if you truly want to be a good investigator or a researcher, you have to have the blinders off, and you have to be open for whatever wants to present itself, not these particular stories that you have to associate with it. And I think that moment has been liberating for me, because noticing that and kind of crafting my entire content base around this idea that we're going to let whatever's here come to me and present itself has allowed me, like, that's the first truly convincing thing for me I've caught on camera. And I've done like 170 investigations in the past year and a half, right? Driving 3 locations a week, 80 hours a week, working, sleeping in the back of my car. I'm on a pace that I don't know anyone that's matching it. And that's not me like,
right.
it's
pounding
true.
my chest.
Yeah,
That's just the logic of it. And I don't know, it's just crazy how much that I've found that they said people find.
Oh, absolutely.
And like, with a lot of auditory stuff, anytime you're in an old place, I mean, auditory stuff can be this, that, or the other. But when you visually catch something on a system, the integrity's there.
Right.
And that the quality is there. Because that one even shoots at 30 frames per second. Most security systems are running at 15 frames per second, which gives you a lot of artifacts that show up in infrared. But this one's running at 30. So like, I purchased this system knowing that I could trust what is coming out of it. And the fact that I wasn't even the one that found it, that somebody else presented it to me, is what's cool about it, because there's almost that added layer of transparency that I'm not even the one presenting the information to myself. There's all of these people that are just clipping parts of my feed that I'm not even watching. So I'm very proud of where this is all going.
It's amazing because I've been ghost hunting for over 40 years. Mm-hmm. And when you take that into consideration, I only have a handful of visual things, like maybe 7 mm-hmm. of all of that. And I've been all over the world. Mm-hmm. And it's like people don't realize how rare it is to get something that internally you don't, because you could get orbs, you can get shapes, you can get this strange thing in the window.
You can find a lot of
right.
You can find all this stuff, but every now and then you'll come across something that you just know wasn't there and didn't have any purpose there and cannot be explained away. So rare. It's so rare, but you have the luxury of thousands of eyes, looking as you're moving. Mm-hmm. And it's like, to me, that needs to be the trend. If people really want to be serious about normalizing paranormal activity or paranormal experiences, it has to be a concerted effort by a large group over a long period of time. And and I think you're doing that beautifully. I think that's so amazing that you can include all these people in this journey.
Right, and there's so many people that are gifted that watch me.
Yeah.
But they may not have the capacity of going to these places.
Right,
but I am giving them in real time access.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think what's crazy about it is, there are so many. For me, sometimes you get tired. I mean, there is the emotional stress and just overall the stress of being in situations like certain haunted locations that people sitting at home on their bed just watching and being able to kind of look at it with clear eyes and a clear mind. You're having people that are in really good states of mind, that are well rested, that are able to watch this footage and find stuff that if you go back and look over it when you are running on 2 hours of sleep, you're going to miss.
Oh, absolutely. And worth mentioning that this is a truth of all equipment is oftentimes the person handling the equipment or doing the observing, it is them. That connection is being made. That person who saw the face, many people were looking at the same time, but only select people. I can't stress enough how the individual ability to witness, see, experience is a big part of it. You can give a camera to 20 people and have them take pictures around. Only one person might get something, and it's not the camera that did it. It was the person holding the camera. It was the person instituting it. So now that you have this amazing body of people looking, mm-hmm. the gifted people will see. And a lot of people will be straining their eyes to see it, but there's a communication, a two-way communication that occurs with the people, who are just invested in, spiritually invested or aware. So yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting to watch.
And I think another really cool part of this is it's like, no matter where I go, no matter what I do, I have this base of people invested in what I'm doing, which, I mean, as a content creator and as an influencer in this field, that's a really nice luxury to have that some people or a lot of people don't ever get to experience. But, for me, I don't look at myself as famous or a celebrity or, I've got almost 600 million views on TikTok. I mean, that is almost the US twice over. Yeah. When you think about that, it's just mind blowing. But for me, it's not about how many clicks I can get on something. It's not about how many views I get on something. It's about presenting something that I'm passionate about and letting my passion drive this vehicle, right? Because I posted on Facebook the other day. I was like, a lot of people think I just meandered into success, but they don't see me sleeping in the back of my car in 20-degree weather with no air on, with a sleeping bag, or eating cans of tuna, or showering at the gym to continue at this pace. Because for me, is a very logical mindset, is I have to get enough sample data to create a trend of what is going on in this paranormal sense, right? I mean, movies or TV shows, if they're at a location a week, that's a week-long investigation. That's technically 7 investigations built into one location. So they're getting a lot more sample data, but they're not filming the entire year, and they're not pushing it. And a lot of times they're not sleeping in these places.
Right.
And what's happening on the times that aren't included in the final product.
Right.
That's what I wanted to eliminate. I wanted to eliminate this idea that, when the camera comes off, I'm running around with my fishing line and setting everything up. I've only had 3 things physically move out of all these places I've ever been, right? And there's some YouTube channels out there, every time the camera comes on, there's stuff flying everywhere, which, again, the juxtaposition between what people are seeing real time compared to what's seeing post-produced starts to present this idea that this one may be more for entertainment and this one may be more actual investigating. Mm-hmm. But I've only seen what I would consider like a vivid spirit once, and this was the first interaction I ever had. So I was on a Boy Scout camp out at the Shiloh battlefield in Tennessee. Now, Shiloh was very bloody. I mean, I won't say it's down here bad, but it's really bad.
Oh, yeah.
It was a really bad
Shiloh was well known, yeah.
They even have the Bloody Pond, which still has that red tint in the water.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
you can still see the iron in the water. But what's crazy is I'm out here tipping people's tents, running around 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember. It was really early in the morning. And I'm zip tying people's tents, pulling their poles out, and watching them fret, and then running off. I mean, that's what I did. I've made mistakes, but
you were a kid. I mean, like kids do things. So
He was 22.
But I'm running on this trail with my buddy, and I see this little drummer boy, and I thought it was a reenactor because what was interesting, and now as the context and lens I look through everything, we were sleeping in the same spot that the Confederates slept the night before the battle.
Oh, my God.
So my tent is sitting on the same ground that they sat on many years ago. So I'm running out in the woods, and we're on this trail, and I see this gray Confederate drummer boy. He looked about like 8 years old. His face was all dirty. He had his drumsticks and his drum. And he said, "Have you seen my platoon?" And I'm like, "What are you doing out here? Like, why are you out here in the middle of the woods? There's nobody." And he was younger than us, right? Because when you're a kid, you know, you think that you're older, even though you're only 3 years older than this kid. But you think, you know, oh, I'm okay out here, but why is this 8-year-old kid out here?
Right.
So, like, you're like, you know, where are your parents at? And he's like, y'all be safe out here. And his English was really old. Like, I could tell it was English, but there was this weird accent that I'm like, what is this kid on? So anyways, I watched this kid walk past me, and we turn, and we watch him, and then he just dissipates.
Were you with somebody?
I was with somebody, but this guy now is... I'm not going to jump into it.
Yeah, just
Sure.
fine.
Not
I was
a
just
reliable
curious.
source.
Yeah.
That's fine.
No.
I was just curious.
But I was with somebody, and we both look, and he was my age as well. So we were both kids, and we both look, and he just disappears.
Amazing.
And I look at him, and he looks at me, and I wasn't into this stuff then because I was a kid. Why am I going to go watch? Like, my dad used to love ghost adventures, and like that's what eventually got me into doing investigations. Which you can say what you want about the guy, but he has opened the door.
He did. Absolutely.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
many people to come into this field and have the success and have the acceptance that we have now.
I was ghost hunting before that show, and you were just an idiot. You know,
People looked at you like
people
you were
like,
insane.
"You're doing
Yeah.
what now?" You know, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
So yeah. No.
So you say what you want about him, but he
No.
has opened the door for so
Absolutely.
many people. And regardless, I used to watch it day in and day out. My dad would have it on every night I came home from school. So I'm watching him at Paveli Island. I'm watching him at all these places. And that's what got my mind and me interested into the investigation portion. Because it's one thing to have that experience. That experience alone is enough to hook you. But you're out here because the 99% of the time where nothing happens, that 1% keeps you going for the next one. And that's where the passion has to be there, because you have to make it through the 99% to get to the one.
Absolutely.
And that's what I think people don't get, especially if they're jumping into the content field with paranormal related content, is you have to be willing to sit there and have nothing happen for 12 out of 13 hours. And there's no guarantee that 13th hour has anything.
Exactly.
But you have to be there to have that, right?
Right.
So I think that's something that people need to understand is you can't just jump into this and become famous, right? And what really makes me happy about my content and my fan base is it's a lot of investigators. And for me, that speaks volumes to what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
Because I don't just have people that like scary stuff watching. I have people that are doing this monthly or weekly, watching it and consuming it because it is something that they put their faith in.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Right.
that for me is the biggest, like, kind of like tip of the hat is I have people that are doing this or have been doing this a lot longer than I have, liking what I'm doing because there is no fluff. There is no, granted, I'm entertaining, but I don't have to make my evidence entertaining. And I
Right.
think that's the beauty of my approach is you never know what I'm going to do. but you never have to question if what you're seeing and what's happening is real. And that's where I think I have made such a skyrocket. It's this lovely blend of the entertainment aspect of paranormal content and just entertainment in general, but you're actually getting legitimate evidence. And I think part of how crazy I am and the things that I do gives better evidence at times because there's interaction that they might never get.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, because if you go into a location like, okay, what's your name? How old are you? How long have you been here? How did you die? That gets boring. I mean, if somebody came into my house and was trying to talk to me and I heard how old are you for the 2 millionth time, I'm just going to be like, I'm not talking to this guy. But I'm asking them, do you like crispy bacon? You know, can you give me the lottery numbers next week? Like things that I think humor, and I love to sing, and I don't like to play music, but I love to sing music because that's me dumping my energy
Absolutely.
into the environment. And I think that makes a difference. Like, obviously, if people can't sing, don't sing. But my purpose is I want to give them my best effort because if they've been saving their best effort, maybe now is the time that they can use it.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I follow that line of thinking a lot. For a long, long time, I've wanted to see, don't take your investigators out, take comedians. Take somebody out there whose interaction with the space will be the entertainment, not the evidence.
Exactly.
Because it's all about the desire to be alive or desire to be a part of this world. And if you send a bunch of scientists, heavy, serious people, who wants to spend their time?
And who wants to watch that?
Right, exactly. Who wants to watch that? And so, you put some funny people in there, and you get this opportunity to A, be entertained, but B, be in the space and have life in the space. Because that's another thing is, you get that very somber and very quiet, and it's like
I'm going to run this EVP session for the next 2 hours, and we're going to go back and review it.
Right.
And that's not me.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Hating on those people. Yeah. But when you're in the entertainment capacity and content creation capacity of paranormal content, you have to have something about you that sets you apart from the thousands of other people that are making the same video at the same place. And that's not to say that their evidence isn't the best. But for me, it's not even necessarily about me having to post evidence, right? Because no one wants to watch a video of a can with red lights on top going off in the middle of a dark room. Without context, that means absolutely nothing to somebody watching that maybe has no idea about the paranormal.
Right.
But when they got me running around singing Folsom Prison Blues inside a Nevada State Prison, and then all of a sudden we have something happen following that moment, we have now added context and a story as to why this happening actually matters.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of people miss the mark is they throw their evidence out there, and it could be the best piece of evidence that anyone has ever seen. But because there is no context, there is no reason as to why this matters, no one's going to watch that. So I think my understanding of social media, content creation, and just the overall approach has allowed me to flourish.
Absolutely.
Well, and a lot of that type of interaction comes with experience. When, you find people who have never experienced a ghost before or anything paranormal, they tend to be on the side of like, this is my one opportunity. I'm going to do what I know is what you're supposed to do. But it's like, we have our followers who always ask, like, Madison, why is everything with ghosts so casual with you? Because when I interact with spirits, I'm like, I treat them like a person because they were a person at some point. And I'm like, that came from time of like, because I see spirits so often and they're so around me, I'm just kind of like, yeah, hey, that's Jim. He's over there, or...
and you can make really good relationships. Like, this sounds weird. Like, I know this sounds weird. But you can have, like, I have this one, I think it's an attachment, and his name's David. And I call him Frat Lord David because he talks about, like, keg stands. He talks about Kanye West, like, crazy stuff that comes through in the environment. And I'm like in this 1800s house. I'm like, okay, nothing in here knows who Kanye West is. Right. No one in here knows what a keg stand is. And it's funny because I invite attachments everywhere I go to go with me because in my context, one, I'm a ghost hunting content creator. So if I have a posse of people that follow me around, if there's nothing happening and they want to make something happen for me, I'm all for it. But another thing is, like, if we believe that these entities are trapped here or that they don't know how to leave here, and I ask them to come with me, they're going to get to live a life that people will never get to live usually. And for me, that kind of makes me happy, right? Because I'm taking something out of, like, nobody wants to sit in this 1800s farmhouse that smells like raccoon shit for the rest of eternity.
Sure.
So if
Very
them
fair.
following me around doing the crazy stuff that I do gives them a different lens, then that makes me happy. So, you know, it's just interesting, as there's so many different approaches to this field, and there's not a right or wrong way to do it.
Absolutely.
Outside of manipulating of the environment. Like, I would say,
even in the manipulation of environment, I will go as far as to say, drawing attention to the field, making things, you know, it's wrong for the attempt, but we are living in a world of story and telling stories and
Exactly.
mass
The
stories.
context.
Being able
Yeah.
for us to have this conversation about manipulated, you know, evidence and manipulated things. It's like they're still partaking in one of the oldest arts available, which is ghost storytelling. When people tell ghost stories, whether they're real or not, what you're really doing is you're opening a mind up to the idea
that there's something
that
out
there's
there.
something there.
And I agree. I would
Yeah.
agree with that.
I mean, but don't do that.
I would just say, like, market is entertainment.
Right.
Like,
Market is
be very
entertainment.
transparent.
Be
like,
transparent.
this is entertainment.
Right.
This is not genuine in researching or investigating.
Right.
Right.
Because I don't have a problem with people, because some of that is very impressive.
Absolutely.
The lengths that people go through to make something happen is pretty incredible.
But we need.
But
to
when
know.
you're marketing
Right.
it as, oh my gosh, look at this ghost interaction. Well, that's not a ghost interaction. That's you and your kid pulling a fishing line from behind the corner.
The classic thing is, you know, when you say, I'm going to tell you a true ghost story, it's such a tricky thing, because the question is, are you telling me a true story, or are you telling me a story with a ghost in it, making it a true ghost story? You know, it's a true ghost story because there's a ghost in it, not because it happened.
Right.
Well, and like,
You know, and
that's-
because there's that campfire appeal. There's the concept, because technically we're also trying to train people to face their fears and to experience fear in a safe environment and to have that kind of sensation.
because people love getting scared.
because people love
Yes.
getting scared, because it's a test.
Yep.
You're testing yourself for when something scary does happen. You get scared and it sets off all the things, and you're like, okay, all systems all check. You know,
Well, and without fear, you can't be brave, right? There
Right.
has to be
Right.
opposition in everything, because that's just the way that things
Right,
are.
it's the roller coaster system. It's
But
like,
what I think is really cool, so like people always say your body's the best instrument to investigate with, because I'm not a big phone app guy. There's a ton of new phone apps,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
for me, knowing that I can go talk about a fire truck, and then all of a sudden on Amazon we start seeing ads for
see a
fire
fire
trucks,
trucks.
but they don't
Sure.
have access to my microphone. I'm like, okay, there's something that's not adding up here. So I definitely think I'm not a big app guy, because I feel that it's a lot more manipulated, or the possibility for manipulation is there. But I'm actually moving, the next phase of my content is me hooking up a heart rate monitor to myself.
oh, sure.
Oh.
And furthermore, I'm going to watch and have my heart rate actually on the screen. But people can watch my heart rate, because for me, like I said, sometimes I think people's anticipation or fear or adrenaline will cause things to happen to them that may not necessarily be happening. So in theory, right, if my heart rate climbs to a out of normal range when it shouldn't be, like, you know, if I'm just sitting in a room and all of a sudden it climbs up and then the activity happens, you could beg the question, did the activity actually happen? Or is it the
was it
fact
you?
that he's
Right.
reacting with an increased heart rate? So, I mean, there's not a ton of ways that we can measure our body, but I think for that one, like, for me, if I'm pretty calm. Like, I ran my heart rate through Waverly Hills, and it was at like 65 all night.
Nice.
So that tells me that it's calm, it's cool, collected, because if something happens in that circumstance, I know that I'm not panicking or
You're not
the
reacting
adrenaline's
to it.
Right.
Exactly. So I think that if we looked at how much activity happens when people are already in a heightened state, how much of that is actually activity or just our reaction to the environment. And I think what's beautiful about what I do is I'm very calm. Like, there are very few scenarios where I get surprised about something. And when I bring people along that have never done it before, it's so fun, because the REM pod starts going off and I know the battery's dying, but they have that experience and I'm like, the battery's dying.
Yeah.
But to them, oh my gosh, what is touching this device? But I think that that's where the experience comes in, because with this field, like, there's some people that you meet that they'll tell you how long they've been doing it, and then they'll tell you why that matters, which the field today is a lot different than it was 20 years ago.
Oh,
Just
God,
the
yes.
access to technology and
Yeah.
the things that we have.
Absolutely.
And that's not to discredit anybody that's been doing it for a long time, but I will say with this field, it's not like a trade, for example, where like if you're a plumber for 50 years, you've probably seen the majority of problems that a plumber's ever going to see. But in this field, because it's all theory based, there's not this compounding knowledge. Like we could find out tomorrow that EMF has nothing to do with paranormal activity, and
very true.
we've been digging on this and building devices out of 3D printers on this for the past 30 years, and I was like, well, I'm stupid. But that's the beauty of it, is you could come in tomorrow and bring something to the table that somebody that's been doing it for 20 years can't do.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where the marriage of, because this field's very competitive in the sense of it's just so jealous based. Like,
Yeah.
if you succeed, somebody else is begging the question, why am I not succeeding?
Right.
But they're doing the same thing that they've been doing for the past 10 years, and they haven't changed it, and they're expecting it to actually go somewhere.
Absolutely.
And I tell people, I'm like, look, I don't think that I'm better than anybody. I don't think that what I do is better than the guy that doesn't have a following. But the point of the matter is there's some musicians that are sitting in their room right now that are better than anyone that's ever played music. But because they don't take the opportunity and they don't take the chance, or they have these stipulations like, you know, I have to have this piece of equipment, or I have to have this camera, or I have to get this location. Because they set those boundaries, they will never succeed.
Sure.
And I think that's where you have to be not only a good investigator, but also very self-reflective of, you know, what am I doing? How am I going to get there? And how can I change if something's not working right?
Absolutely. Well, that is a great note to end on. We do have to start wrapping up, but I do want to show you our lovely new doll that we have.
Can I kiss this doll?
You can have a kiss.
Yes.
So I was going to say that, Kalani, this has been like one of the best episodes we've shot, because I've been like hearing it and all of that, and I think that a lot of our listeners are going to agree. So we actually, my dad just gave me this doll because he thought it'd be good for a horror film, but he found it in our attic, and he doesn't know where it came from. It wasn't mine. It wasn't my sister's.
Those are the best ones.
Right.
Exactly. So this is our haunted doll. It'd be an honor for you to kiss it.
Okay,
Yes.
so we are going to, so for anyone that doesn't know me, dolls especially, I kiss pretty much every doll that I'm allowed to kiss. So
God,
we
she's
have-
awful.
Oh, this is a wonderful looking doll. She's got glitter stuck, so we'll give her a there, and we'll put her back in her box. But so there's a school in Ohio called Post Town, and this will be the last thing I'll tell you. So there's these two dolls. One of them I call Slender Woman, because I give nicknames to stuff. I'm like at Mark's house, they have a movie prop, and I call it the baby. And it's sitting in the middle of his living room.
I
saw
with a
that,
cowboy hat on
Right.
and a planchette in his hand, and I'm like, that's the baby. And like everybody online loves it because it's creating entertainment in areas that I'm comfortable creating the entertainment. So I'm at Post Town, and they have a doll room that people have dropped off dolls. They've sent dolls from all over the place. And there's this one old doll that I called Sweetie. And she's got like long black hair, and it's like, I don't even remember the kind of doll. It's a very expensive doll. And there's another one I called Slender Woman, because it was like super long arms and legs and had no clothes on, but the face was all cracked, and it was just creepy looking. So I was like, all right, I'm going to shove Slender Woman in this locker, and we closed it, and all the lockers were closed, and we're like 2 hallways over, and there's no one else in the building. And I'm screaming for the name of this bad teacher. I'm like, hey, yo, Miss Johnson, where you at? And all of a sudden we hear, boom, and I run. I'm sprinting because I want to see it. And the only locker that was open was the locker that I crammed Slender Woman in.
Sure.
So from that point on, those two dolls gained like this massive notoriety, and anyone that comes into that place is trying to like carry them around. So they had to lock these dolls up because I named them and had an interaction with them, and now they're like the
Celebrities.
dolls. Yeah. So it's pretty crazy.
Got the
but
ghost bump.
Yes.
That's it. So I'm a big kisser of dolls.
Yes.
There you go.
So always kiss your haunted dolls. Maybe they just need a little love. You never know.
They just want a little love.
I don't endorse that.
But yeah, do you have anything you'd like to plug, Kalani?
So if you just go to KalaniGhosthunter.com, you can find everything that I do, from events to social media links. I'm on everything, and I have at least a week-long lockdown planned every month this year, but I also have a ton of other stuff packed in. So if you're looking for paranormal content, I'm your guy.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, next time you're in Savannah, we'd love to get together with you to
For
ghost
sure,
hunt.
for
Yeah,
sure.
because especially some of the places you had mentioned that you wanted to go do, we've had some weird stuff happen. So we'd be happy to
This
join
city's
you.
haunted.
It's
It's haunted. Very haunted.
Absolutely. But thank you so much for taking your time out to come talk to us. It's been so insightful. You really brought a lot of really interesting theories that I don't think we've ever necessarily
fantastic.
touched on.
Absolutely.
So
Yes,
Well,
exciting.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. So like Kalani said, if you don't already follow him, you can follow him on TikTok, on Instagram, all the good things. If you don't already follow us, I don't know how you haven't yet, but
What are you doing listening?
right. But you can find us under Haunted City Podcasts on all social media platforms. And if you are looking to become a para-junkie, we have very exciting content coming out this year for 2023 over on Patreon. So definitely go check that out. But with that, my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.